Good evening,
Hi, guys.
ladies and gentlemen. We are so glad that you are joining us here this Wednesday night.
Yes.
It's been a really hot week
Yeah,
the last couple of weeks.
It's beautiful tonight, though.
It is.
It's starting to cool off
Absolutely.
at night, so
Yep.
it's kind of nice.
Absolutely it is. We want to welcome you to Table Talk number 35.
Yes.
And we're glad that you can join us, and we want to welcome you. We're coming live from 1920 Wellick Road at our Estevan Studios. And again, the whole purpose of these table talks has always been to be able to have discussion and talk about pertinent life things.
Having real conversations.
And you know, I meet people from time to time, and I know you do too, and how they appreciate some of the subjects we talk about and the things we deal with. And that's important because I've been saying all along that so often we've been presented with ideals and how they need to, how everything works based on everything working out the way we want it to work out. And we learn really quick that life doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and sometimes we want all the answers, and sorry to let you know, we don't always even have all the answers, but we want the conversation.
But we're willing to have the conversation and discussion.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about media and social media and YouTube and all that other kind of stuff that we use, and it's important for our listeners to understand that you don't have to watch us live. You can continue and look on our YouTube channel, Estevan Church of God on YouTube, and you just hit the Table Talks or the list of different programs that we have, and you can it's there for you to grab hold of and and so it's important for us just to let you know that it's available there, because we believe in resourcing. We believe in providing tools. I think that's something we talked about fairly often. Is this isn't always answers necessarily, but sometimes it's just talking about tools, and sometimes we talk about some personal things, and sometimes we talk about working through struggle and difficulty, and it's fun because I've never had this before in my life, and I could have really benefited from someone else talking about their journey and giving tools and how we can really walk through stuff.
And it's good to know that you are not alone.
Yeah.
Like, we've had our own valleys and mountains to climb, as have every person watching, every person that tunes in.
Yes.
We know that's life. Right? And it's so good to know when you can hear a voice, when you can hear people just giving hope, giving tools, saying, I've been there before.
Yep.
And maybe we don't have all the answers, but we're walking together.
And sometimes, to be honest, it's not about having the answers.
No.
Sometimes the discussion itself, as we discuss and as we talk about certain things can be triggered, and things can all of a sudden make sense. And nothing else, we want to provide a perspective, another perspective of looking at things, because we're all influenced. I've said this many times. Our greatest influence are the things we focus on the most. And sometimes the stuff we focus in is just not healthy stuff. And it helps steer our life. And when we talk about faith and relationship with God and those aspects, we're not talking about religion. We're not talking about coming into a system of things that you have to check off in order to please God, but rather it's coming into a reality, into a relationship. And that's what makes walking with God organic, is it's not a system. We grew up, it was pushed, the system was pushed, expectations, all those things were laid out, and what that created was an us and them mentality. You either conform or you're out. And life's not like that. And I'm glad in my relationship with God, as we've journeyed through, that that's not true. God is not about that, and he knows how to work with you. He knows how to work with me. His hands are never tied. He's never living in disappointment and wondering when you're going to get it and when I'm going to get it. But he's gracious and patient to walk us through these things. And that's why, again, the reason we're having these table talks is to give an avenue in which you're able to listen to some discussion about regular life stuff. And we highlighted many times, it's about talking about real life. I don't want to talk about ideals. I don't want to talk about the perfect thing and the perfect that. I want to learn how to navigate through life. And sometimes there's really excellent things about life, and sometimes there's things about life that really suck, and I rather skip out on those things.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
unfortunately, we can't skip out on those things. We have to learn to navigate through those, and so we're dealing with Table Talk 35.
Yeah, and I love what we're going to talk about tonight, because it is actually about real life stuff, and many of us ask that question: really? What are we talking about?
Really? We one of the things that Helen and I often do is we study together early in the mornings, and we have coffee and we talk about stuff, and we ran into a verse in Romans chapter 8, and it's a pretty well-known verse if you've grown up in church culture, but the reality of that verse, sometimes it gets lost in familiarization. When it becomes so familiar, we can quote it, we can name it, we can pray it, we can all that kind of stuff. But sometimes it's stopping and taking a look at really what's being said. And I mean, life does that many times. When we take things for granted, we know stuff, and we don't stop to really recognize and sift through some of that stuff, because there's golden nuggets. Yeah, there's some stuff I do away with, absolutely, or I don't understand, and that's okay. It's not about learning everything and knowing everything. It's about adjusting in the process and making the necessary adjustments as I face things, as I go through things, whether they're good or they're bad. And so the verse says in Romans chapter 8 and down to verse 28, I believe, something significant there. He says, and we know. And we know. It's interesting how the writer starts that, who wrote that letter to the Romans, writes that and says, and we know. It was almost like he wanted to make sure that those that he was writing to, that they would have an understanding, but this is a certainty. And I don't know about you, but in our society, in our world, the way things shift and turn, we need certainties. I mean, not everything is certain. Parts of life we have to learn to accept that we don't know, or we're not sure what's coming. But when there's a certainty brings a rest. A certainty brings a security. A certainty is like, okay, at least I know this. At least I know this. I know this. And so that's how Paul writes this letter to a church in Rome. And he says, for I know, or we know. And then he says that God works out all things. You know, that's an interesting word, all things, because it's an inclusive word. It's not an inclusive word. It's exclusive, or
inclusive.
It's inclusive, like not exclusive. Sorry.
Doesn't leave anything out.
It leaves nothing out. And so he's giving them a certainty. And it's like I said before, we need certainty, because in shifting and rocky and difficult and hilly and times in our life, we need certainties. And so Paul writes, he says, and we know that God works all things. Again, that scope of all embraces everything. And I'm glad it does that, because it's a truth. It's a truth we can apply to our own life, because our life is no different than the Romans. We deal with stuff, we walk through stuff, we adjust with stuff, and things are thrown at us, and we don't know how to respond to it, or we don't respond correctly to it. But he says, and we know God works all things for our good. Now, without understanding that concept, I could have a lot of questions. Really?
What if it doesn't look good? What if it doesn't feel good?
Right.
What if it doesn't sound good?
I remember people telling me, that's life. But the problem with that is, yes, that's life. But if we don't give answers, if we don't give a perspective, if we don't know how to work through, that's such an easy statement to shrug off. It's like, how are you? Good, fine. Oh, you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
And sometimes we have that hope. Oh yes, this is going to turn out for good. Oh yes, God is going to do something good in this mess, and we believe it for a time. But all of a sudden we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're like, when is this crap changing? I thought you said that you're working this for the good, but I still don't feel it. I'm still not seeing it. And I feel like a lot of us, even through what we've walked through the last half a year, we're tired. We get tired of waiting for good. How, God, are you working this in me for good?
And sometimes while we're waiting, we start manipulating stuff because we don't like waiting. waiting is not my thing.
No?
I don't like waiting, and you would know more than anyone because we live together. But
Yes.
waiting is always been a struggle because I'm a results-driven person. I like to see things happen. So if I do this, I expect this. If I do this, I expect that.
Yeah.
I expect things, not necessarily always perfect, but I expect things to move. So when I'm in a waiting time, when I'm in a waiting period, my mind starts going and I start thinking and I overthink, and as a result of that I start thinking negative, and then I think worst case scenario, and before I know it, the mind is racing at all these scenarios that nothing has happened, nothing has played out, but yet in my mind it's acting as if it's real. And so waiting is not a good thing for me, I thought, because I felt the longer I wait, the potential of something disastrous happening is all the more imminent. But the reality is, waiting is a gift. Waiting's a gift, because if we understand that waiting is a gift of ours, then we're going to treasure that moment. Maybe we're waiting for the right person to come into our life. Maybe we're waiting for the right promotion at work. Maybe we're thinking, my circumstances have to turn around. Maybe this has to shape different. That has to look different. And as a result of those things, I think we can get discouraged. We can get disoriented. We can get frustrated. We can lose hope. All those aspects that disappears.
Yeah, and I know that even people that we know, people that we love, have been waiting for a new opportunity for work. They've been waiting for... Stop it! You're distracted.
Adjusting some stuff here. I'm distracted.
But we're waiting. People are waiting for the next door to open because they've been stalled. And sometimes we feel trapped. And when we feel trapped...
waiting can make us feel trapped, especially if we're
trapped in a hallway and we don't know which door to go through. And we're thinking, we don't feel the goodness. We don't feel like it's all working for good.
I think one of the things that really highlight for me is when I felt trapped, because I felt like I was waiting for circumstances to turn, or waiting for situations to unfold differently than what I was anticipating, or if I know something's coming in down the line. I know something's shifting, and then you're at that point where it's not shifting, and you're really beginning to question the fact that something's not happening, and you get this trapped feeling like all of a sudden it's all going to implode on you. And one of the things that I learned in those contexts, in that situation, and I'm still in process, I don't always get it because I'm still navigating through stuff, but I'm learning that when I start feeling that way, it's okay not to make a decision. It's okay to take a deep breath, step aside, and just wait. But when you don't treasure waiting, when you're impatient and you're at your limit, you feel, and many times we feel like we're at our limits, and when we're pushed to that point, we often do things that we would not normally do because we'd have space to do it. But when we're impatient and waiting for something to turn, it doesn't happen. It's almost like we have to. And many times I've fallen into that and caught us into trouble because I made life-altering decisions at a moment of pressure.
And when you felt trapped.
And I felt trapped.
We're going down.
I'm reaching for whatever I can because I'm in panic mode. I may not look like panicky, but in my mind and in my mental health, I'm panicking. So I'm starting to dump the stuff that are going to keep me back from doing that kind of stuff. And as a result of that, I really set myself up for disaster.
And yet, in the middle of that, and we're talking real life stuff because we've been here.
Yes, we have.
We've been here where we've actually ran from our circumstances because we have felt trapped. And we've ran, and sometimes it's not been the best decision.
No.
But guess what? God walked with us.
That's the thing that is powerful.
Even when we feel trapped and we make decisions, maybe that later on we might regret. We're saying, man, that was a dumb decision because we felt trapped and we felt like we're going down. And so we manipulate and we strive and we work hard and we make something else happen, honey. And yet, now guess what? God can still work all of that for good in our lives.
Yeah.
How does he do that?
And it's important that you made that statement. God works it out, because sometimes we get trapped feeling we have to work it out.
Yes.
So we try harder. We have higher standards. We manipulate the system. We pray more. We read more. We do all these things because we think that in itself is what's going to bring what's needed. And it's amazing when Paul writes that, he says, and God works out. He does all the heavy lifting. I have to do the adjusting. But when I allow him, and I've said this many times Sunday in our services, when we invite God into our situation, we're bringing in his resources, we're bringing in his wisdom, we're bringing in his perspective. And the more I allow him to have control of the situation, the less I'm apt to feeling trapped. And I can move in a position of rest where I can wait.
And you know what? That comes with getting to know him.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely relationship based. Because when you know his heart, and his heart is absolutely for you, and it's for your best.
Yes.
He can take your mess. He can take your failure.
Yes.
He can take the circumstances that have been thrown at you.
Absolutely.
He's taken all the hell of life, and he can deal with it. He will deal with it. And so you can trust his heart for you, for your good.
Absolutely.
And when you have that relationship, getting to know him, that's when you can anticipate in the waiting, rather than in the waiting getting all fretful and having to manipulate and strive.
Yes.
You know, that place of
that is
rest.
not fun, being in a position of striving and earning and working and twisting and turning and trying to make things happen. Waiting, we got to see waiting as a gift. I think if we don't see waiting as a gift, we're often positioning ourselves for disappointment and trapping. And usually when we position ourselves for that, that's all we make ourselves aware of, and then we prepare for the worst. When we wait in a restful way, waiting, going, you know what, there's nothing I can do. I can't do nothing about this situation. The only thing I can control is my reaction to it. And one of the things that's important for us to understand is we have to learn to take responsibility for our actions. Too often I blamed the church, I blamed people around me, doctrinal beliefs, all that kind of stuff for the mess that I found myself, or in the disillusionment that I found myself in. And it was easy to ride that wave, but riding that wave doesn't do anything for here. Doesn't do anything for here. And when I began to recognize that I have to take responsibility for my own life, yes, I might have been influenced, but the decision was mine. I allowed to be influenced. And now I recognize that maybe what I was taught, some of it was not true or not right or distorted or in a religious context. I have the ability now, when I invite God into that perspective, that now I can reshape that idea or that thought or that principle or that belief system. I can reshape that. And when I can learn that I can take responsibility for that, then I take ownership from that. And so often the lack of change that happened in my life because I wouldn't will to take ownership. And if we're not willing to take ownership, we're not going to change. We're going to continue to find people to blame.
And you know what? Like, even in the circumstances that we find ourselves right now, and I've noticed sometimes I've gotten really tired. And sometimes you just want to control something. Like, man, it would be good to control our government, or we can control,
absolutely.
Like all the crap, right? Some of us just get really tired of a lot of stuff. But when you can't control it, and you want to because you feel like, I'm trapped.
Why do we believe that by trying to control it makes it better?
Yeah.
Why do we believe that? Because that's often where our default is. Yeah.
And the thing is, the entrapment it comes from inside. It comes from our belief system. And so, you know what? We just want to give hope today, because
yes, absolutely,
the God that we're getting to know, and we're in relationship, we're on a journey getting to know him, but it can free you on the inside. No matter how much stuff you want to change on the outside and to get rid of that entrapment, God wants to free you on the inside, saying, hey, I got every detail of your life covered.
And I'm going to work it out.
Yes.
I'm going to work it out.
He is He will. He can.
Yes.
He's totally
Yes.
capable, and
Absolutely.
he will do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he will do it.
He will.
Yeah.
And when I recognize that,
Yeah.
I can have peace in the midst of the storm, because often we think, and this is true for, I think, many people in general, that when the outside is in order, the inside is in order.
Then you
feel like I'm fulfilled, or okay, I'm at where it
okay.
is. But really, it's
it's all
about
good.
it's about being well in the inside.
Yes.
That way, when we're well on the inside, it makes no difference what's going on the outside, because we're well inside. Everything flows from the inside out. And that's why Jesus often made illustrations. It's not what goes into a person that makes them messy. It's the stuff that comes out of them. And that wasn't a negative statement, but rather it was just an analogy, that because so many times we're looking for external things, external stuff. If we have this, we have all the standards, all these things, and put it around us, all the security around us, we're going to be secure. And where Jesus was saying is, but that's not necessarily true. Yeah. When you're whole on the inside, secure on the inside, and that's coming to grips with who we are, who God made us to be, who I am on the inside, that I am somebody that is important. My life isn't revolved around my decisions that I make and the mistakes I make, but rather when we begin to recognize that He works from the inside, that changes everything on the outside in that process of stuff. And so excellent stuff.
And I love this in Romans 8, just a few verses before that. It says, that is why waiting does not diminish us. Just like waiting doesn't diminish like a pregnant mother. You're waiting for something good to come.
Yeah.
And it's going to come.
Yes.
Even though waiting and the pain of labor, it just feels intense, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, but it's going to come. It's going to come. And sometimes when we get tired in the waiting, it says God's Spirit is right alongside helping us. And even if we don't even know what to say,
that's important. It comes alongside us.
We don't know what to do. In that moment, He begins to work in us and around us. And we can rest knowing, even in our struggle, in the waiting, in the circumstances, He's doing something.
Waiting isn't, and it's important to us to understand, waiting isn't negative. But waiting can work for our benefit if we wanted to. Waiting can work for our benefit. Too much of the fast-paced world, everything's now, and we've lost the art of waiting. I mean, not sitting 10 years waiting for something, but the idea of waiting, it doesn't have to happen now. It's going to work itself through. And when that happens, again, it just influences our perspective.
Yeah.
What are some tools that we can just leave to help in that process of waiting? Yeah. You know, we titled this session, and you work all things out for my good. And I crossed out you and said, really? Because that's honestly sometimes how we feel. Yeah. You got to be kidding me. Yeah. How in the world could this ever work out in my favor? Maybe we got a pink slip, or we lost our job. COVID has made things extremely difficult. We've had to navigate through some difficult things with work and finances and
the people we love
and watching the devastating effects of some of that stuff. And so really, how in the world? Yep. And I'm glad we don't have to figure that out. We don't have to figure it out. He's going to work it out. Yes. And again, the idea of it, when I'm right inside, when I'm at peace with myself inside, then the panic is not always on the outside. And when I'm at peace, I'll speak peace, because whatever is most prevalent inside is what's going to come out. And that's why it's important to bring God in perspective into my life, into those areas, because He always speaks. And I said this Sunday.
And maybe point number 1.
Yeah, I said this Sunday that God always speaks grace, hope,
and life.
And life.
Absolutely.
And those are the 3 things that ooze out of Him. And that's the things that we know these things are from God, is because those dynamics are ever present, ever real. So if they're not, those dynamics aren't real in my context.
Hope, life, and grace.
Yes. Hope, life, and grace.
Yeah.
So let's leave some tools, because this is real.
Yep.
I'm waiting for things. I'm personally waiting for some things to turn around in my life. I'm at a point where I'm wondering, okay, how much longer?
Yep.
And I find myself in that. So what are some tools that we can talk about and leave here as we're coming to a close of our table talk? What are some tools we can grab hold of? Because it's not always about this is the answer, but here's a tool that'll help you navigate through that whole situation.
Yeah.
First of all, I said we talked about a little bit before we were having coffee is having the right diet. What do we mean by having the right diet?
What are you eating?
What are you filling yourself
Yes.
with? What is getting your attention? What are you consuming? What are you reading? What are you listening to? What are you watching? What are you occupying your mind with? Is huge when it comes to this
It's
waiting
huge.
aspect,
People,
and
it's
it's working
huge.
out in my favor.
Yep.
It's huge because if we turn on the television and we see a certain perspective bombarding us all over the place. We go downtown and we, interact with people. We're bombarded with the same perspective.
Yeah.
So it's important for us to have the right diet. We need to have the right intake.
Yeah, we do.
This is the thing that really hit me a few weeks back. And this is what really hit me was we don't have to listen to everything that's being spoken to us.
Yes.
We don't have to watch everything that's being told to us or demonstrated to us. We have the control switch. And so if we understand having the right diet is we determine what we're going to allow our minds to hear, our eyes to see, what we hear, what we speak, all those things are so crucial. Once someone said, if you focus on eating McDonald's all the time, your life is going to start showing it.
Yeah.
And so, not that McDonald's is bad. I enjoy going there. But I'm just saying, if we fill ourselves with sometimes always not unhealthy food.
Yeah. And I thought of this even today. I'm a sweets girl, but you know what? Sugar can give you a real high, but it will crash you.
Yeah.
And it will drain you. And so because it's not a healthy food, it isn't. So if our diet is simply, it might give us a high for a bit, but we're going to get tired.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not going to give us what we need, the refreshment that we need.
So in order for us, one of the tools is, in life, if we want to, in that waiting period, and we're finding ourselves frustrated, and how can God work these things? How can it turn into my favor? It looks gloomy. We have to have the right diet. We have to watch what our intake is. What are we feeding ourselves with? The second thing I think is important too, and I like the first one because, it's so practical.
Yes,
but the second one is understanding that there's more to the picture than what meets the eye.
Oh.
I think we can get so, this is what happens to me. You get so zoomed in that you forget that there's more out there than what I'm seeing. And oftentimes when we're trapped, that's what gets us the most. We're zoomed in and all we see is that one dominant thing. So key number 2 for a tool is understand that there's more to the picture than what meets the eye.
Yeah. And when this first started, I was having a conversation with God, and I'm just going to say a sentence of what I heard. But he says, I'm going undercover, and in the face of this humongous fear that's prominent globally, he says, I'm doing something undercover that you might not be aware of. But I am going to free people. I'm going to uproot the lies that people have believed. And you know what? In saying that, it reminds me of a puzzle that's all a jumbled mess.
Yes, yeah.
And people say there's a picture in there, and you're trying so hard to see it, but you can't.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's undercover.
Yeah.
But all you see is this jumbled mess, and sometimes you feel like that. But that's not the real picture.
No.
And so
Absolutely not.
People say, relax. Relax your eyes. Don't try so hard. And all of a sudden, this picture comes out of the jumbled mess, and this beautiful picture emerges. I think that's what God is doing behind the scenes sometimes
and
that
the
we
thing
don't
is,
see.
this is the reality. We'll say this and we'll move on to the third point. But often if we have expectations of what this is supposed to look like, how it's supposed to come together, what this thing is going to take place, and that's all we're looking at, we miss out the bigger perspective because God's not limited by us. And when Romans says will work all things for the good, we can see a jumbled mess. And we don't know how it all comes together. But it's until we relax and rest and all of a sudden the image appears, and it's just like it almost appears out of nowhere.
Yeah,
but the reality is that image was always there right from the start.
Right.
But if we're so fixated on the lines and crossing and all this has to be this way. The fact is, we live in a shifting world right now. What we thought was secure has been uprooted. What we think was the answer has now been jarbled. What we think this is what it needs to return to, the ties have been cut so much there's no way we can return to that again. We're forced to make a shift in how we think, how we see, how we perceive, and how we respond. We're forced to.
Yep.
And the people that have a hard time with that are going to end up dragging their feet, missing what all is out there.
And it can be so painful.
It can be painful, yes. Understand, the tool number 2 is understand that there's more to the picture. Yeah. Third thing we want to leave to you as we come to a close, and that's this. Be patient with yourself and others. Mm-hmm. Be patient
in the waiting,
with yourself.
Waiting for the good to come. Be patient.
And be patient with others. I find it myself and in my life and the people that are closest to me, when I'm impatient, I'm not patient with them either.
Yeah, exactly.
If I want things now, I'm expecting them the things now.
Yeah.
And I realized that over the years, what that does is it creates stress, and it creates tension and all these kinds of things. And I could enter into a room and tension would rise. Mm-hmm. It's like when I see religion around, my tension is up. That's had such a negative impact on my life that I don't recognize that there's more to the picture. Back off, relax. I don't have to respond to it. I don't, and that idea of being patient with yourself. Sometimes our expectations are so high that we even can't meet it ourselves. And I just want to say, give yourself grace in this process. Be patient with yourself and with others, because they too are in process.
Yes. We are all in process.
We're all in process.
And God is working out every detail.
He is.
Into good.
Absolutely. Yeah, you betcha.
Yeah.
Well, we just want to say thank you so much for joining us again.
Thanks for having
this
coffee
Wednesday.
With us.
Thanks for having
so
coffee.
Good. We
so appreciate that.
Yep.
And we just want to encourage you. There's a lot of resources and programs that we have on our YouTube channel. And we would encourage you to take a visit to our YouTube channel and just check out. We have our Sunday morning services on there. We have Table Talk. We have other little different things that we put on there too, and we just want to make it available to you as well. So thank you for joining us.
Click the share, click the subscribe.
Absolutely, we would love that.
Connect with us. Give us a message.
We would love to hear that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Have a great night.
You bet. Bye-bye.